The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar and YouTube live session. My name is Shane and I am delighted to be joined by Shane Young, SharePoint and PowerApps MVP consultant at Bold Zebras USA. Today, Shane will be sharing with us his top 5 Flow and Power apps. Okay. And I'll just start by sharing my screen, everybody. There we go. Don't forget to check out the Resource Center. This is packed with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com/resource-center. And now, let's get started. Hello, Shane Young. How are you today?
Hello, Shane number 2. How are you? I'm doing great.
This is going to get very confusing.
Yes, this is going to be one of those, inception type of things, right? We've got 2 Shanes. I'm sure this is a world record-breaking webinar, right? I don't think there's ever been one with 2 Shanes ever. So we are, the world is about to be changed for the better.
That's it. So Shane, I've just handed over control to you. If you can take control and we can see you there, that's brilliant. I suppose, Shane, maybe a quick introduction and tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Shane Young. As the other Shane did such a good job of pointing out, I've been a Microsoft MVP for, 13 or 14 years now. So spent a lot of years doing the SharePoint thing. And I still do SharePoint work. I don't want to say I've gotten away from that, but it's kind of evolved, right? It's been one of those challenges to move from the on-premises to the cloud is a lot of us have had to evolve our skill sets, which is good, right? We don't want to get bored and stagnant. And so I've kind of moved mine and taken a lot of my legacy, business app or business knowledge that I learned. So how business processes and business rules and business logic went through. And I've started to apply that into the Powerapps and Flow space. So I look at this as an extension of my SharePoint skills, not a starting over point.
Great. Brilliant.
So real quick here, there's my email address if you'd like to email me, or Twitter at Shane's Cows. Don't ask. It's a long story. We've only got an hour, so I won't tell the story of how I'm Shane's Cows, but I am. My YouTube channel. So most everything that you're going to see today, as far as like the flows and the things we talk about, there's a YouTube or 10 YouTube videos that go along with it. They'll help you rebuild that same type of thing. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And I'll show this again at the end of the slide, because right now you're like, who cares? No one likes the Shane guy. But by the end, you're going to love me and want to contact me. So we'll come back to this.
Super. So Shane, I think the first thing you're going to talk us through today is how to create a PDF from Powerapps data using Flow and OneDrive.
Yes. So let's just jump right into it. And as we go through these, you guys are going to see that some of them are very polished and beautiful demos, and some of them are still just the working parts. But either way, I think all the concepts are going to come through. And so this first one here. So what I had a client who came to me and said, hey, we want to have a purchase order request process in Powerapps. I'm like, hey, no problem. We do that all the time. He said, but the thing we want to do is after the purchase order is approved, we want to send a purchase order to the actual end customer or the end vendor. We want the vendor to receive the PDF. And today they were making those very manually by hand after the process was going through. So with a little elbow grease, little engineering, I figured out that if you combine the power of Powerapps for facilitating the input of the purchase order information, the approval processes, all the sorting and filtering, all the normal purchase order stuff, you could then have it take that output of an approved PO and send it over to Flow. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have Flow take that input and convert it to a HTML document, because once it's in an HTML format, then Flow can convert an HTML to a PDF. And so then once you've got a warm PDF in hand, it's pretty easy to ship that off. So my app here is not right. I do not want to try and show a whole purchase order app, so we went pretty straightforward here. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some text in here, and we're going to say 2 Shanes is better than 1. I mean, might even spell it right, but probably not. Better than 1. I did not say anything that I would spell anything correctly. And so we're going to press this magical button. And you can see the little ants marching across the screen. All right, it is done. And so if we go and look over here in OneNote or OneDrive, and I put them in OneDrive because this was the easiest place for me to kind of have as a stopping off point. I don't think, so there is, the PDF actions are tied to OneDrive, but the file doesn't have to live there at the end. So I don't want you guys to feel like, oh, I'm not using OneDrive, this doesn't apply. I just happen to shove them out here because this was easiest for me. And so what you can see is that a few seconds ago, this file HTML was updated. And so if we click on this file, what we should see is, yep, your invoice, and then 2 Shanes is better than 1. So that was the text that we pushed over from PowerApps. And so then now that that has went, shortly later, if we refresh the screen again, we should see that about a minute ago, my file 2 PDF was updated. So we had the HTML files where I just showed you. So now if we go into the PDF, woohoo, we have a working PDF document. And so just to make it easy to demo, I just stuck the content here. But you could put the content anywhere in this mix. So for the actual customer, right, we're filling in all these blanks around their purchase order. All right, so let's jump over and take a look at how that works. And also, as I'm going through this, you guys feel free to post questions in the chat. Shane number 2 is watching these, and he will kind of interrupt me and say, hey, you know, somebody who's not named Shane asked a really great question, and we'll kind of pause and do that. So
hopefully there isn't a lot of Shanes watching.
Hopefully there is. I mean, we want to have a collection, right? I'm trying to start a world order of Shanes. So, okay, so this is my my flow. And so this first action is just a simple, hey, go out to, or, you know, PowerApps is going to trigger this, right? So this is what we do. PowerApps says, all right, do a flow. And so then we're going to get the file contents of the logo file, right? If you remember when we were over here, right, we had this nice little logo, right? We have a company logo on our purchase orders. This is in 1985, so there's our logo. Then I went and initialized a couple variables. And so the first thing I had to do was the logo, basically the way that the logo file was stored wasn't working. The file format, the HTML file couldn't figure out what was going on with that. So there's a great little function that, and we'll talk about this one again in a little bit later, but what this function does is it's going to change the logo into a data URI, right? So instead of passing the image file itself, it's going to convert that to a data URI, and we're going to save that as in a variable called logo. And this, right, so we're serializing this so we can incorporate it into our HTML. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for the logo. Then what we're going to do is we need the HTML for the HTML file, right? So, and I could have made that down here, but I pulled it up into its own expression to kind of give myself the maximum flexibility. And I'm going to apologize now. This is really difficult to read. And there's not a good way for me to show this to you. There is a video that kind of walks you through all this. So if you're like dying to know all the dirty details, don't try and take those notes here. Just know there is a YouTube video that would walk you through, you know, for 20 or 30 minutes how all this works. But basically what I did was I'm going to use the concat expression in Flow, which combines multiple strings. And so my first string is just a bunch of HTML, right? Doc type HTML. I mean, this is just pure, the HTML you guys learned to write a million years ago. And then I'm going to do a comma. So that says, okay, all of this before the comma, that's that first string. Then I want to combine a second string. And that second string is that encoded version of the logo, right? That's that variable that we made in the previous step. So then there is, so it's just putting that inline into the HTML. So that'll work. Then we go down here, you know, some more HTML. So we're just tying all together. And then the third and last most important piece is we're also going to get, wait, that's not the one I wanted to show you. Is it? Yeah, it is the one I wanted to show you. And so then what this one is, sorry, I confused myself, is that this is initialized variable value. This is the value that we were getting from PowerApps. So we said get value from PowerApps, and then that pulled in the text that we typed. Remember we typed over here, 2 Shanes is better than 1. So when we typed that in, that pulled it in. And so that's how that piece of text got in here. And then the rest of this is just more of the concatenation or the HTML. So all of this to put together just one big blob of HTML. So then we could go over to OneDrive and say, all right, I want to create a file. I named it file2 HTML because I'm very creative with my names. And then I just dumped that variable in there. So that's how we got not this file, but this file2 HTML. And then what we're going to do is we're saying, all right, I want to convert file using path. So go get the path of that file, right? So we use the dynamic variable or the dynamic environment, the dynamic content. That's what I'm trying to say. Path, right, from create file. Where is it? So there's create file. And so in here, there's the path. So go get that same file and convert that file into a PDF. Pretty fancy. And this is where I had to use OneNote because OneDrive, because OneDrive is one of the few that have this convert PDF action. And then now that I have that conversion, I have it created, I have it like hovering in flow space. Then I take the output of this, right, which is called file content, and make a file called myfile2 PDF. And that's how we got that fabulous PDF that we were able to take a look at. So this is a great example, though, of, I needed to get outside the box. I needed to kind of go and, do something with PowerApps that PowerApps didn't really know how to do. So I almost always go to my buddy Flo and combine the power of the two of them. And that's how we get through these type of things. So, all right, I just rambled a whole bunch. Shane's, anybody got any questions, or am I doing good?
You're doing good so far, Shane. Thank you for that.
All right.
If anybody wants to ask a question, feel free. Okay, are you ready to move on to the next topic, Shane?
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. Topic number 2, change SharePoint list item permissions dynamically with Flow. All
right. So this is another fun topic. It came to us from one of my customers who they're a real estate company, right? So they manage lots of multifamily apartment buildings and that type of stuff across most of the U.S. actually. And so one of the things that they needed to do was, as they were moving different financial documents through different stages, they kept having to change the permissions. So they had all the budget docs for all the different properties in one folder. And certain times of the year, it was kind of a free for all, right? The different property managers could come in, modify the files as they needed, and it was great. But then what happened was when they would get to certain lockdown periods, they had to lock those files down. And what they were doing was, my poor buddy Rob was having to go in and file by file change the permissions to lock them down, because they didn't want to move them. They didn't want to have any like global settings. Every file had unique permissions. So what we came up with for Rob was he wanted to be able to just set columns. So he wanted to go to the document library and say, all right, if this file, is set to this status, then go query this other location to pull in what the file should be, what the file permission should be. And then if it's not, or if it changes to a different status, then we want to kind of undo that. So what I wanted to show you guys here was kind of how I worked through. Once again, we're not going to show his app. I want to show you the process of getting Flow to update SharePoint permissions, because it's one of those things that seems impossible on the outside, and then it looks really scary. But if you just drink an extra drink of coffee and take a second, it's actually a pretty consumable thing. And the other thing I want to mention before I do this, because I'm about to use a word like APIs, is I'm not a developer, right? I don't want you to think, oh, well, of course you can do this, you're a fancy developer. I am not. I'm an infrastructure guy who became a business guy. So don't feel like I have some secret, C# coding skills. It's the reason I did this. This is just me, putting my best nerd hat on one day and kind of figuring out how something would work. So if we go over here, let's look at what my Flow did. So I have a Flow, and I did change file permissions. So we're going to say edit this flow. And so what we did, this is one of those kind of pro tips I wanted to share with you guys, is when I am testing flows or building flows to figure out how something new works, like this complicated thing we're about to do here, I don't try to have my trigger be, when an item in SharePoint changes or when, some convoluted thing happens. What I like to do is I just make my trigger be a manually trigger a flow right here. I'll delete it real quick so you see the one I choose. Delete that. So up here, there's a flow button for mobile, and I'm not going to use this for mobile at all. But the nice thing about the flow button for mobile is the only input for that is, just smash the button, right? Press the button and it goes. So to test this flow, all I have to do is press the button and it goes, instead of me having to go over to SharePoint and upload a document or go over to PowerApps and, click some buttons there. So this is one of those testing tricks that I want to make sure you guys kind of stole. Okay. So what we're going to do, so when I press the button, and in their case, the trigger for the customer was when an item in SharePoint changes. But for testing, I said, all right, manually trigger the flow by pressing the button. We're going to send an HTTP request to SharePoint. So this is taking advantage of the SharePoint, object model, right? So where we can go and do things. So if you've ever heard people talk about like doing CSOM, right? Client-side object model. The object model that they're interacting with, well, it's really just a bunch of simple API calls that kind of, once you figure out the pattern and the rhythm, it's a very follow along type of thing. So I said, all right, I'm going to use the action called send HTTP request to SharePoint. So what's our site address? Well, it is this whole site/PA, right? So that's my test site. And I'm going to do a method of post, right? So that just means I want to post data up to that API. And really, when you're kind of messing with these things, as far as, us non-developers, there's really two things that we usually do. Get, right? So I want to pull information back, or post. I want to push some information out to the API. And so then what we're going to do, this URI thing, this is where you get all the crazy stuff, but this is where a little bit of, Googling or Binging, whichever you prefer, will get you, the answers, and you just have to translate it. All right, so I'm going to post to the API. I'm going to hit the list, right? So give me the list for that site. I'm going to get the list by title. And so the name of my list is Excel files. I do not remember why I named it Excel files, but I did. So that was the name of my list. And in this case, I'm getting the first item, right? So items is 1. And so that's not saying get the, only get 1 item, we get 10 items. That's saying get the item where the item number is 1. And then I'm going to run the break role inheritance. And so that's going to break the permissions of the file from inheriting from the parent. And then I'm going to copy the role assignments, and I'm going to set those equal to true. So what that means is copy the file's current permissions. And then clear subscopes. I honestly don't remember what that, I don't remember what that one does. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm not going to make anything up. I don't remember what I did with clear subscopes. I think it's one of those things that's just required. I think it's always true. Oops, my bad. So the important one here, I'm positive the only one I changed was copy role assignments equals true, because I wanted to keep the file permissions. Okay, so that sets the file to non-inherit permissions. The file now has unique permissions. And so now that the file has unique permissions, if we go to the second step, what I did was I said, all right, I now need to get, right? So our method here is get, and I'm going to go to the API for the web. I'm going to get the site users, and I'm going to get them by email. So what I needed was I needed my user ID. So you can't pass over and say, hey, set the permission for Shane at PowerApps 911. Instead, what I had to do was I had to say, all right, I want to set the permissions for whatever Shane's user number is. And so that was why I needed to go do this get step. All right, so now we got a whole bunch of information back. I'm going to initialize a variable. And what this is doing, if we click on this right here, I think without breaking it, is it's grabbing the dynamic content flow. All right. Well, what it's doing, it's not doing a good job of showing, but it's grabbing the from the HTTP request to action above, right? So body of the request, go get the data the data block that came back. That's the D there, and then get the ID property, right? Because we went and got all this information about Shane at PowerApps 911. That's me. It feels weird to talk about myself, but I needed the ID, so I grabbed the ID using this little formula and stored that into the principal ID portion. All right, and so then now that we've kind of got all the pieces of the puzzle, we're going to send an HTTP request over here to PowerApps. And so what are we going to do? We're going to post again, and we're going to post to the list, get by title Excel files, item 1, role assignment, add a role assignment, right? So add a permission. Principal ID is 11, that was mine. And then role definition ID is 107, blah, blah, blah. That was the type of thing that, once again, I just went and searched for role definition IDs for SharePoint Online. And there's, somebody had posted a blog post with all the different IDs. Okay, so that's my flow. Now, if we go back up here, so let's go take a look real quick. So this is that first file. So if you look at the permissions right now on this file, we're going to see if we go to Manage Access and Advanced, right? It's currently inheriting permissions, and there's Excel viewers have group permissions, and then these 3 groups. Okay, cool. All right, let's close that. Let's go over here, and so let's test our flow. So we're going to say test. I'll perform the trigger action. Right, this is the reason that I use this manual trigger button. So we'll say test here, and then all we have to do is say run the flow. It is off and running. Your flow ran successfully. Always a good thing when you're demoing stuff. And so now if we go back over here, we'll do a quick, we'll click off of book 1. We'll click back on book 1. Oh, you can see my pretty face already. Manage Access and Advanced. And so you can see that now this document has unique permissions. It kept all of those permissions it had before, but then now we gave me the read access permission, right? Because that's what that role definition ID, whatever those crazy numbers were, we spit it out. Those are what was here. Now, one of the important things that I had to do, and this is what I do a lot when, especially when I'm writing flows around new functionality, is this test feature is great because it ran the test, but it's also really neat because it shows you kind of what goes and what comes back. So as you're troubleshooting, I can click on this and I can see that, so it did the post, and the outputs here were basically a null value. So nothing really good came output from that. Send the request here though. Remember where we went and got the my user? I'm probably going to show you something I shouldn't show you here in a second. But here you can see, right, there's that D. Remember I said go get from that that action, get the D property, or because I don't know, SharePoint names it D. But then here you can see all the things, my alerts, my groups. There's my ID is 11, and that's how I figured out where that. There's my login name, my title, right? The fabulous title of Shane. Yeah. So that was how I knew kind of what information was coming back. We made our variable. And then finally, if we go down here at the bottom, we'll see that nothing came back from our final steps. There was nothing really to check other than that it was successful. But one of the things I want you to take away from this is, yes, you can modify permissions, and anytime that you need to interact with things inside of SharePoint that are API based, so they're not just getting list items in their pieces like you're used to with PowerApps perhaps, or the default flow SharePoint actions that you feel like safe using. All of this API stuff is pretty well documented on how you go and get these things. So you just need to go find where someone else has done it, grab their little string of code, and then you just start filling in the blanks, right? And so if you were stealing my code, you would look at this and you'd be like, all right, well, so Shane does it for just item 1 every time. So then you need to kind of go through and figure out, well, how do I get it for, how do I have PowerApps tell me what item to get? Or how do I let the user choose the item? And so you just go replace this little chunk of code with whatever way you're getting the dynamic item. Or maybe you want to have a picker that says, role definition ID is different, right? Maybe sometimes you pick read, sometimes you pick full control, and you're passing that from PowerApps, and it's just an if statement. So, this stuff it seems really scary, but Flow makes it so easy for us non-devs to interact with API calls and things like this that I want you guys to kind of see that and understand it. The other thing I'll throw out here, bonus tip, because I just had this happen on Monday. If you're doing anything with Project Online, there is Powerapps and Flow connectors for Project Online between you and me, right? And I guess the recording, so it'll live here forever, but they're mostly worthless because they don't really get you back the data that you want. They get you back some very generic data. So what I had to do is I went out, I found a blog post where some guy had written some client-side object model calls that he was making from PowerShell to get the real detail information from Project Online. And so I took his code and I stopped and thought about it for a minute. I was like, wait a minute, Project Online is really SharePoint Online, right? It's just a wrapper. So I used these send HTTP requests and was able to send those to project sites to run this guy's really complicated PowerShell that he had dumped on the internet. So I didn't know how to do anything. I just kind of cut and paste, filled in the blanks with my knowledge of how these worked with his great code. And boom, I was able to get all the information from Project Online that I wanted all the projects in a certain stage. So anyway, I thought I'd just throw that bonus tip out there since I literally took and applied this to a really weird place just Monday. So, all right, Shane, I did the thing where I rambled a whole bunch again. How'd I do?
Oh, very good. Just one quick thing before we move on. We have a question here, Shane, if you're up for it.
Yes.
Okay, so it goes, the command for SharePoint like that scope parameters are arcane. A good place to learn those, they're asking?
I don't have... I would have to go look. I don't remember where I did it, and I didn't put it in my notes. I usually do a good job of putting in my notes. Like, 'cause I have this giant OneNote notebook with all those type of secrets. But if that person will email me or tweet me or something like that, I will send over. I'll go do some more binging, and I will happily send those over. But I can't rattle one off the top of my head. Sorry.
No problem. And just for a few people as well, just to let them know that they might have joined the presentation a bit late, we will be sending out a link to the entire high resolution version of the presentation following this, so just to let you all know. Okay, topic number 3, Shane, are you ready for this?
I am. What is it?
Okay, I'm going to ask you how to automate email and mailing list management with Flow.
Oh my goodness, so this is exciting. That's a great question, Shane. You're good at questions. All right, so one of the things so kind of back up, right? 'Cause I like to give you guys kind of the context where this stuff came from. So if you go out to good old powerapps911.com, that's right, I'm plugging my own website. What do? Go away. So out here on the bottom of this page is a contact us form, right? So 99.9% of our customer leads come in this way. And so we've done this for my previous company. We do this for another company. You know, web form contacts has kind of been the norm for us for a long time. And it works really great for, you know, the whole customer process. But one of the things that I realized was, you know, I had never in the past done anything around putting these type of things into a mailing list or having a way to follow up with these customers who, for whatever reason, the sales process didn't go. So, but another problem though is I didn't want to just sign all these people up to get spam, right? No one wants more spam in their life, right? You're all thinking there's no way in heck I'm going to contact you if I know that if I contact you, I'm going on to some 18 spam lists later, right? I think that's fair. I don't think you should. So what I did was I said, well, wait a minute. This is a business problem that it has very straightforward rules. So what I wanted to figure out was how could I use Flow to take this information and process it so that I wanted to actually ask people. So after you fill out this contact form, what I want to do is I want to ask you, hey, we're going to get back to you about the whole, you know, your question, the things you need help with. But while you're waiting on us to do that, do you want to join our mailing list? And if you press you want to join our mailing list, I just want to magically in one click of that button, add you to our mailing list, right? So I don't want to give it to anybody who doesn't want it, but it turns out that probably 75% of people who contact us for help with Power Apps or Flow or any of the sort, they want to join our mailing list and they're excited. So I'm like, well, if you want to join my mailing list, I want to make this possible. So I sat down one day and wrote a flow to do this. And so I'm going to show you the actual flow that we use. So ask PowerApps 911 contacts to join the mailing list. And you can see I got a bunch out there running. So here, if we say edit flow. Okay, now one of the hard parts for me was a lot of people, when they do this stuff, they control their website, right? They hard-coded the entry form, or they're using, you know, a platform where they're putting the users kind of in a way that they can control things and do it. Well, that is not the case. So for us at PowerApps 911 and for boldzebras.com, the other website this is running on, we use Wix for our website. For better or for worse, a lot of people laugh at me and make fun of me for it. That's fine. It works for what we need. But so Wix has this built-in contact form that you just saw, and that contact form just sends a text-based or an HTML-based email, text-based, I don't know, one of those type of email formats. So I don't have it in a database to query. I can't have the contact form trigger a flow. So what I had to do was I had to say, all right, when a new email arrives in my inbox, and it is from no reply at parastorage.com, because that's what the the emails come in as. So when those emails come into me, okay, I want you to go off and do a whole bunch of really complicated work. And the reason I have to do all this complicated work, so we won't spend too much time on it, but the reason I need to do all this complicated work is because I had to parse that HTML piece by piece by piece. So we're not going to overthink it too much here, but basically I go and I grab a portion of the string, right? So I strip out the first 275 characters, because those 275 characters are always, you know, the header information. So strip out all of those. So that's what this does. I then grab the name, I grab everything after that. So basically take the body that came over, take out everything that had no name. So now I have everything post the name. This is where I grab the email address, and we're not going to get into these text functions because it'll take us hours, but I had to write a text function because the email address can be different, right? You're like, oh, you just grab everything, you know, from the start of the email field to where it ends in .com. Well, what if somebody sends it from .eu or from .au, right? Or NZ, right? We get a lot of international customers. So I had to really kind of think through a little bit of a different set of business logic. So I ended up having to find the next known field and just assume that everything between the two known fields is an email address, which was pretty tricky. And you know, I'll show you one of these, but once again, we would never have time to like talk through all this. But right, so I have to do a trim and replace the text of what came in the body of the thing. So find this text and basically trim all that out. So, but the great thing is that Flow has all of these wonderful, if you look down here, no, not conversion functions. Where are they? It has a whole bunch of string functions. I've just passed them over, I'm sure. Oh, they're at the top. So you do a see more here, right? So concat, substring, replace. And this is where you get really convoluted, and I had a really tough time, but I was able to get through it. Okay. So then first name, same type of thing. I create a variable for first name because I'm going to use it. And so I'm going to try and set the first name value in there. But what I found out was some people don't include a first name. Or sorry, some people only put their first name because the fields are wide open. So some people do first name, some people do last name, some people do like their weird initials. So I really had to keep iterating through this to work through to get the first names, the last names. Okay, anyway, so we get a bunch of those. And then I check to see if the first name makes sense. If the first name came out blank, then I change what I got in last name to be first name. All right, anyway, we got a bunch of information about people. Oh, that was complicated. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have even talked about any of that. So then we're going to send an email with options. So this is just a default flow, but we're going to send it to the person's email address. And we'll say, hey, thanks for contacting PowerApps 911. We're going to give them two options, yes and no. And it's going to say, you know, Shane number 2, may we add you to our mailing list? We send emails less than once a month and promise to never share our mailing list with anyone. And then we give them the whole thing. You know, if you need to talk to us immediately, call us on the phone. If not, we'll get to you here soon. But so this is a default flow email, and it's going to just have at the bottom, and there was no easy way for me to show you this. So if you want to see what it looks like, just fill out the contact form and say, no, we won't bother you. But there's a yes button and a no button at the bottom of the email. And so if they choose yes, So we did a flow condition, selected option equal to yes. Then we add them to our MailChimp mailing list. And then I send an email to myself that says, ha, you got another person to sign up for the mailing list. Good job, Shane. And if they say no, then it sends an email that says, womp, womp. They don't like you. And in reality, what happens is, either people generally will hit yes right away, or they never press no. Almost never does anyone take the time to press no. They just don't do anything. And if they don't do anything after 30 days, it just, the flow fails out. And so they don't get added, and, we don't bother them again or anything like that. But this is an example of something where, I had set business rules. I understood the whole process. I just had to go and break this thing down so that I could route these emails back to users. And I wanted to do an approval email, right? So, because if you look at it, you can do approval emails to do very similar, but approval emails in Flow can only be sent to people in your Office 365 tenant. And so obviously people contacting our help desk are not our tenants. So that's where I figured out that send email with options works almost exact same way as approval flows. It just takes a little bit of, a little bit of shenanigans on your part to kind of work your way through sending this particular series of events. So, and this is something, so we were going from collecting no people under our newsletter list to, in the first couple months of this rolling out, we passed 100 a couple weeks ago, people that have been added to our mailing list, which is driving real business value, right? So we're promoting the new Powerapps and Flow training class that I'm doing. And so now we have 100 plus people who have self-selected to receive those type of messages. And we sent them all a nice little 10% off coupon and said, hey, thanks for being on our mailing list. We're running this class. If you want to join, here you go. So now you might not be like me and be a small business owner, right? You might not have a website with a contact form, but I bet if you kind of stopped and looked at it, I bet there is a flow in your day-to-day life just waiting to be automated, right? Maybe every time you get an email from, HR, right? You need it to, send you a text message to alert you, hey, you're in trouble with HR again, or you need to have, maybe you get help desk tickets and you need to have those tickets. You want to have some action kick off, some sequence of events every time you get one of those tickets. There's a lot that you can do with this. So I really encourage you to, maybe it's not sending things to a MailChimp mailing list like I did, but there is a lot you can do with grabbing flows when you get new emails arriving. Another one of my customers I talked to last week, they have, so when people create tasks for him, what he does, he has a flow that automatically adds an event to his calendar, right? He wanted it on his personal calendar when they assigned him a task in SharePoint. So those are just the creative type of uses when you start to really think about engaging with flow. So, all right, Shane, I talked way too much about that also, but how are we doing?
Good. We have a few questions in, Shane, so I'll just shoot them over to you.
Yeah.
First one is, why are you not using d.id?
So the d.id in the so that was for the previous one around setting SharePoint permissions. I don't remember why, but I feel like I tried to use d.id directly, and the next action was getting confused. I couldn't figure out the right way to cram that in. So what I found was the path of least resistance for me was putting d.id into a variable and then just using that variable. So not saying you couldn't you're not smarter than me and you couldn't figure out how to use d.id, but I found it was easier to use use it in a variable.
Okay. In relation to the expressions you write, is there any quick way of testing them? Or have you run the full flow to test the expressions?
No. Yeah, unfortunately with these expressions, it is not a great experience. I won't lie to anyone, right? It's a lot of trial and error. What I would tell you is like when I do, like, so when I was writing this flow to begin with, what I did, right, was I had a button trigger up here, so I didn't have to really do any input. And then I would, or no, I did not. So I ran this full flow once, right? It blew up all over my face. But then when I went to test it the next time, I could use the data from the previous run. So I didn't have to resend myself an email over and over again. So that was one trick that I used. And then what I would do is I would, instead of having this whole thing here, I would just have this one step, because you can initialize variable, and then I think when you do this, the output shows like what went into there. But yeah, I mean, basically, no, you have to keep running the test over and over again. So.
Okay. Is it possible to pause an action, for example, sending email until a defined date in Flow?
Yes. Yes, that is a great question because I know the answer to that one. See how this works? If you ask a question I know the answer to, it's a great one. So there is a, I believe it's delay. Yep. So delay until. So you can either send over like a date and time. So, say delay until tomorrow at 5, or you can do delay, 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 weeks. So for example, maybe if they don't say, yes to my thing right away, right? I want to delay a week and ask them again, like, hey, you didn't sign up. I would never do that because I'd feel spammy, but if it was something where I was allowed to spam them, like, so it was an internal email or something, then yeah, I could absolutely do a delay.
Okay.
Sorry, last little thing on delay is remember that it works in UTZ time. So, us Americans, we struggle with that. You guys are a little bit better at time zones than we are, I think. But just keep that in mind. Is sometimes when you start messing with it first, you have to worry about like what time zone things are in. So, all right, sorry.
Okay, and then the last question in this section, is it possible to send a picture in an Outlook email using HTML? This person uses base64 body underscore user underscore photo, etc. v2 brackets, things that I don't know about.
So I have never done it. In my head, the way that works, so I have customers who send emails with pictures, they do them as attachments. But if you wanted to do the image in line in the HTML body, in my head, what you would do is the same kind of thing as we did with the PDF, right? You would need to write the HTML. So you would, do the that data URI function to convert the image into the URI stream. And so then you would basically compose a giant HTML block, and then when you send an email in Outlook, you would say body is my HTML block variable. I've never tried it, so I can't guarantee it works, but in my head, that's where I would start.
Okay, great. Back to the expressions question. For expressions, are they similar to formulas in Excel? So would Excel be a good place to practice?
So that's a great question. The answer is sadly no. So Power Apps and Excel, their expression language is very similar. I can literally cut and paste some of my expressions from Excel into Power Apps. But for Flow is actually Azure Logic Apps under the covers. So its expression language is more Azure Logic app centric. So for example, like text delimiters and things, they are different in Power Apps versus Flow. The concat function does two totally different things. Same function name does two totally different things in Power Apps versus Flow. So there's, unfortunately, no, Excel is not going to help you be a shortcut for writing Flow expressions either. So I'm sorry. I'm full of bad news.
And then back to the delay question. How long can you delay? More than a month?
Now you're just making me try here. I mean, so it looks like in theory, I mean, I've never done it, but I mean, it looks like I could do 5 months. Right, so delay 5, and then there's my month with my unit. So I have not, but I think there's some weird things around the amount of time that a flow can run. So I want to say, but I don't know how this would affect it, but I want to say that flows time out after 30 days automatically. And so you have to do some shenanigans to make a flow run longer than 30 days. I have not had a customer requirement that had it go past 30 days. So I haven't had to explore that, but kind of from reading blog post headlines and things like that, if you're starting to think about holding a flow out for months, I think there's some weird stuff you need to do, but I don't have a super strong answer there for you.
Okay. There is more questions, but in the interest of time, let's move on.
Okay,
Shane, are you ready for number 4?
Oh, all right. Is it going to be as awesome as that one? Because that one was a lot of fun.
Okay. How would you capture photos in Power Apps and push those SharePoint document libraries?
Ah, see, Shane, I know what you're doing here. You just want to see my pretty face again. So if we go over here, I have built a wonderful little Power App to do this. So there's me. Hi. You can see my bag of Doritos over there. You know, my desk is quite messy. I forgot that my desk was going to be in the camera. What do you do? So what I did is, so I've got a Power App, right? Send a pic to SharePoint. So we're going to say take a picture. So I'll wave. Gosh, I'm not photogenic. I'm going to give it a file name. We're going to say ugly.jpg. And then we're going to send some metadata, right? Because a lot of my clients, when they want to do pictures when they do images, they want to, they want file names and things like this. And we could auto-generate all this data. But in the customer story I was solving here, we needed to grab the file name, so the user had to input that. And then they were doing a metadata field of, it was a type of form. So it was a different safety forms and things like that. But I did type of animal, dog, cat, and fish. And I'm a dog person, as you all probably know from Chewy, right? There's a Chewy sticker right over my head. And so if we hit save to SharePoint, boom. Then we get back, right? Open file in SharePoint. Let's see what I put to SharePoint. Fingers crossed. There I am. Look at that. I'm on the internet. I'm a celebrity. I'm a star. Yay me. All right. So that's the Power App that I put together. So let's go talk about how that works. All right. So this up here, and this one we'll kind of cheat on. We won't spend too much time in here because this one there is literally a YouTube video that walks you through building this one from a blank canvas. So this whole one has been documented pretty well before. But so what we're going to do is we're going to take a picture. And so when you take a picture, right, so we're going to set a variable called taken picture, and we're just going to put the camera stream into that. So that's what then is shown here is taken picture. We have some inputs, right, file name and type of animal. And then so we have this thing saved to SharePoint. And so what save to SharePoint is going to do is ignore this whole set, but it's going to run this, what I have highlighted in blue. Let's talk about that first. So that's going to run a flow called Powerapps camera to SharePoint.run. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass two pieces of information over to that flow. We're going to send it the text input one text, right? So ugly.jpg. Oh, and it looks like I already had JPEG, so I should have just done ugly. Oops. And then we're going to send the taken picture over. And then we're going to send drop down selected values. So we're sending three things over to flow with this thing, with this particular press of the button. So let's go over to flow and see where I did that. Oh, I did not have that one open. Oh, rude of me to hide this for myself. Nope, nope. All right. What did I say the name of the flow was? Sorry, I didn't have the tab already open. Powerapps camera to SharePoint. Control find camera. Powerapps camera to SharePoint. There it is. So let's edit this flow. Okay, so Powerapps is going to be your trigger. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a file. And we're going to put it out in my shared documents folder out in SharePoint. File name is create file name that we got from Powerapps, right? So this is saying Powerapps passed over that text input one text, and we're just filling in the file name with that. The second piece here, this is the one where everyone gets themselves in trouble. So file content, data URI to binary. So this is one of those expressions where the way that basically what it boils down to is SharePoint stores images different than every other file system in the universe. So in order to take a normal picture and store it in a SharePoint, we have to convert the data URI that came from Powerapps into binary. So the flow team was kind. They gave us a function, but that's all we had. We run this expression, function, whatever you want to call it. I guess it's a function. We run that function against the file that we passed over, right? Remember over here we passed, nope, not there. Over here we passed the taken picture, right? We passed that actual image from our Power App. So we're going to take that file that we passed over and we're going to just convert it. So data URI to binary. This is where every time someone asks me, why aren't my images showing up in SharePoint? This is always it. They missed this data URI to binary. Okay. So that's what we did. Then we're going to say respond to Powerapps, excuse me, and I'm going to send a property called FL for file link back to Powerapps. And what this is going to be is I just did a concat function to grab my SharePoint URL plus the path to the file that we just created. That's how we return the link to the file back to PowerApps. And then we go down here, and then I went and I updated the file properties with that the type of animal, right? So where I chose dog, that's how I wrote dog back to the thing. Okay. So then back over here. Okay, so that's the flow. The flow runs. Remember, the flow returns this .fl. So this is one of those tricks that's kind of neat. So I'm going to say I want to do a set, right? This is how you create a global variable inside of PowerApps. So set variable 2 equals the output of this function. And so in this case, or this flow, the FL. So that was how we got back the link to the file that we just created up in SharePoint and handed that back to PowerApps. So this comes up all the time though, right? People want to get their images and things into PowerApps. So I want to kind of get this out here. As I mentioned before, I realize you can see me now and you just saw me drop my earpiece and it really hurt my ear. But there's a whole YouTube video that will walk you through this step by step. So don't get too, we're going to go fast on this one because we only got 9 minutes. I want to tell you one more thing really cool. So this is this one. Shane, what do you think?
Yeah, it's really good. There's no questions on this one, so that's great, Shane. Apart from one person wants some of your Doritos.
Yeah, my wife made a mistake of buying me a big bag of the blue Doritos. I love the blue Doritos. They're good.
Are they fresh?
Yes. Oh, I will finish those off for lunch today. Okay. So last but not least, we got one more. What fabulous thing do you want to see with our last 9 minutes, Shane?
Okay. By pure coincidence, what flashed up on the screen earlier, I'm going to ask you, can you drive your Telsa with Powerapps and Flow?
Oh, how did you know? Yeah! All right, so with our last couple minutes here, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you guys this crazy app. All right, so I have the good fortune, my wife bought me a Tesla for my 40th birthday, so I love my little Tesla. And one of the really neat things about the Tesla, right, is unlike other cars, my car has an API. It has an API that I can interact with. Not a developer. I could never write code to do it. But what I figured out was I was smart enough to write a Power App that calls some flows that interact with all of that. So if we hit connect, hopefully this works. Every now and then I break this app, and then that would be really embarrassing. Shoo! So there is Vader. So what I just did on that first screen was logging in with my actual Tesla account information. And that's why I had it all hidden so you couldn't see it. But so this is an image. This is coming back from Tesla. So based on the options that I return in the API about my car, it goes and fetches the right image up there to be the options from the car. So and then it's asking the car, all right, how many miles do you have on you? Oh, I've driven it a lot. What's the cabin temperature currently? These are in Fahrenheit, by the way, so you don't get really weirded out. But so inside the car, it's currently 69. Outside, it is 58 degrees. I did not realize it was that chilly here. And if you figure, so this is roughly 20 degrees Celsius, and I don't know, it's like 17, I think, Celsius. So the AC is currently on. The car is not charging, and it looks like I have 191 miles of range right now. So I made this app. We won't get into too much of the other functionality here, but the reason that I made this particular app, let's close this, go over to, where did I put it? All right, well, let's just open my flows again, leave. The reason I made this app, though, was remember I told you guys I'm not a developer, and I'm going to continue to stand by that, but I wanted to learn how to work with APIs. And I couldn't do sample data. I got bored too fast. It just wasn't one of those things that was happening. So what I did was I said, wait a minute, working on my car, right? So yep, ran 1 minute ago, so this is the right flow. Working on my car is something that I'm excited about. So what I did was I learned to interact with the APIs of the Tesla. And that was how I learned to do the API stuff for SharePoint and for Project and for all the other customer Google Map APIs. I needed a project that made sense to me. And so basically all I had to do is send a request, right, a GET to this Tesla Motors API. Vehicles is my particular car. And then the authorization was this auth token up here. And I think, yeah. So all this particular one does is goes out and gets the data of the car. So this gets all of the API data. So, you know, are the doors locked, the charging state, the how many wheels does it have, what color it is, all of everything that Tesla knows about my car, I get back in this one chunk. And this, and I just had to, you know, figure out how to send over the bearer the authorization token. So not one I want to get into the you know, the dirty details with you too much. But I wanted you to kind of see this because this is a great example of an app that helped me learn a bunch of things that I couldn't find a way to get myself to want to learn, you know. And for example, the cabin temp, they stored that in Celsius. Oh, and so I had to remember how, you know, my 5th grade math, how to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit because I wanted to see in Fahrenheit. I also, you know, a lot of these, you're like, well, there's already a Tesla app that does all this. That's true. Right. So my Tesla app does all of these things. But one of the things that I never fully finished, but I wanted to add the functionality around scheduling a start. So this uses that delay action that somebody asked about earlier, right? So I wanted to be able to go in here and say, all right, I'm playing golf right now. And I know in 3 hours, I want the AC to kick on so that in 3.5 hours, when my round of golf is done, I can, I'll jump into a nice cool car. So the way this is set up is I can just type in a time and schedule a start. And so then Flow would go out there and wait until that time and then send over the command for, you know, turn on the AC so Shane gets into a nice cool car. So that was kind of my thought process. The other thing that I planned to implement here was to do things like if the car is not plugged in, so if the charging state is not connected and it's 10:30 p.m. at night when it should be charging, then I wanted to have have Flow send me a message. And so a bunch of little stuff like that. But the key thing here was this was my app that motivated me to learn how to deal with APIs. So I encourage you guys, if you're like, hey, I want to learn APIs, I'm not a developer, I'm scared of them like I was, to go find an app that makes a lot of sense for you, that, you know, that works with something that you can geek out on. So you don't mind spending the long hours trying to figure out how to make this silly button actually start the car, or this button how to unlock the car. So, all right, Shane, we got 3 minutes. I know I talked too long, but what's up? Anything?
No, but everyone is very impressed with your Tesla app, so that's pretty cool. And people are asking, will you share your Tesla? Never mind the Doritos.
Nope, we stop at Doritos, sorry.
Shane, that's pretty much it for today. Have you anything else you want to add?
Nope, I'll throw my contact info back up there again. If anybody wants to do that, check out that contact form. Right? You can just say no. You won't get spam, but you'll get to see how that looks. And no, I appreciate you guys having me. This was a lot of fun. I like to just geek out and kind of show off some of the different cool things you can do with Powerapps and Flow.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your time today, Shane. On behalf of the European SharePoint community, we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you guys for having me. It's you're a fun group, and you know, I get to interact with the European SharePoint and Flow community quite a bit, so it's a lot of fun.
Great. And thank you all for everyone that stayed with us on YouTube. We had a bit of a few technical difficulties at the start, but I'm sure you're aware, Shane, that when you start doing something new for the first time, you have to start to figure it out.
Yes, yeah. We stream our weekly podcast on YouTube Live, and we've been doing it for years, and we still have to figure it out every week, I feel like. So, yeah, I totally understand that.
Great. Shane, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Shane.
Okay, everybody. So a big thank you again to Shane Young. And just bear with me here for one moment. And I just want to finish up by saying that is all for today. See sharepointeurope.com/register- for webinars for further details on all upcoming webinars, or visit our resource center for all previous webinars, and a recording of today's session will be added, and everyone who attended will be notified by email when it is available. That is it for today. Thank you all for attending. Take care and goodbye.